The champagne flute in my hand might as well have been filled with poison. I watched my wife Morgan work the room at our anniversary party, her laugh echoing off the vaulted ceilings of our suburban home. 20 years of marriage, and here I was, the invisible man at my own celebration. "Tom, you look like a ghost," Phil Martinez said, appearing beside me with 2 beers. My old army buddy had that concerned expression he wore when he thought I was about to do something stupid. "Just observing," I replied, accepting the beer. "You know what they say about intelligence work. Old habits never fade." Morgan was holding court near the kitchen island, surrounded by her usual circle of friends. Tasha Williams, the neighborhood gossip queen, hung on every word. Rachel Chen, Morgan's college roommate, nodded along like a bobblehead. And there, leaning against my granite countertop like he owned the place, was Grant Bishop. Grant Bishop. Real estate mogul, country club regular, and apparently the reason my wife had been working late every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 3 months. "Earth to Tom," Phil nudged me. "You're staring." "Am I?" I took a long sip of beer, my cybersecurity consultant brain already cataloging details. The way Morgan touched Grant's arm when she laughed, how he whispered something in her ear that made her blush, the fact that she hadn't looked in my direction once in the past hour. "Maybe you should go over there," Phil suggested. "Why, so I can watch my wife flirt with another man up close? I think the view from here is educational enough." The party continued around us, neighbors and colleagues making small talk about property values and weekend plans. Normal suburban life, except nothing about this felt normal anymore. Morgan's behavior had shifted over the past few months. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she flinched when I touched her shoulder. I'm not stupid. 20 years in intelligence and cybersecurity teaches you to recognize patterns. The pattern here was clear as daylight. "Tom!" Morgan's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. She was finally looking at me, but her expression was more irritated than warm. "Come meet Grant properly. He's been eager to talk shop with you about security systems." I walked over, forcing a smile. Grant extended his hand with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. "Tom Driscoll," he said, his grip deliberately firm. "Morgan tells me you're in cybersecurity. Fascinating field." "It has its moments," I replied, matching his pressure. "Mostly it's about identifying threats before they become problems." Something flickered in his eyes. Good. Message received. "Grant's been helping me with some investment opportunities," Morgan said, her hand resting on his forearm. "He thinks we should diversify our portfolio." "How thoughtful," I said, though I prefer to handle our finances myself, old-fashioned that way. The conversation continued for a few more minutes, polite and venomous. Grant mentioned his new Jaguar, his upcoming trip to Aspen, his penthouse downtown. Morgan laughed at his jokes like he was the funniest man alive. After the guests left, Morgan disappeared upstairs without a word. I found myself alone in the kitchen, staring at the mess of champagne glasses and appetizer plates. Phil had offered to help clean up, but I'd sent him home. I needed to think. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Your wife's car is in my driveway again. 3rd time this week. Thought you should know. Concerned neighbor." I stared at the message, then at the address attached. Grant Bishop's Street. Of course. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and sat in my home office, surrounded by the tools of my trade. Multiple monitors, encrypted hard drives, communication equipment that most people couldn't pronounce, let alone use. This room was my sanctuary. The place where I solved problems for corporations worried about data breaches and industrial espionage. Maybe it was time to solve a more personal problem. I opened my laptop and began typing. Within an hour, I had Grant Bishop's complete digital profile. Property records, business licenses, social media accounts, even his credit score. The man was leveraged to his eyeballs, despite the flashy lifestyle. Interesting. Morgan came downstairs around midnight, wearing the silk nightgown I'd bought her for Christmas. She moved through the kitchen like I wasn't there. "Good party," I said from the doorway. She jumped slightly. "I thought you'd gone to bed." "Just finishing up some work. Grant seems nice?" "He is." She opened the refrigerator, her back to me. Very successful. Very ambitious. Very married, too, I noticed. She turned around, her expression carefully neutral. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, just an observation. His wife seemed lovely. What was her name again?" "Jennifer." The word came out clipped, sharp. "Right, Jennifer. She mentioned they're trying to work things out. Marriage counseling and all that. Morgan's jaw tightened. People change, Tom. Sometimes marriages run their course. Do they? I finished my whiskey, set the glass on the counter. That's an interesting perspective. She brushed past me toward the stairs. I'm tired. Long day? I bet it was. She paused at the bottom of the staircase. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all, sweetheart. Sleep well. I watched her climb the stairs, then returned to my office. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Morgan's number, but it wasn't meant for me. The message was clearly intended for someone else. He suspects nothing. Same time tomorrow? Can't wait to see you again. I screenshotted the message, then opened my secure files. Time to start documenting everything. The next morning, Morgan was gone before I woke up. She'd left a note about an early meeting, but her coffee cup was cold in the sink. She'd been gone for hours. I called in sick to work and spent the day doing what I do best, gathering intelligence. By noon, I had confirmed what I already knew. Morgan's car had been spotted at Grant's office building every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 2 months. Her credit card showed charges at expensive restaurants on days when she claimed to be working late. Her phone records revealed hundreds of calls and texts to Grant's number. But the real revelation came when I accessed our joint bank account. Morgan had been transferring money to a private account I didn't know existed, small amounts at first, then larger sums. Over 3 months, she'd moved nearly $30,000. My phone rang. It was Morgan. Hi, honey. Her voice was artificially sweet. How are you feeling? Still under the weather? Much better, thanks. Productive day, actually. Good. Listen, I'll be late tonight. Big presentation tomorrow? Of course you will. Which client again? A pause. The Henderson Group. I told you about them. I pulled up her company's website. No Henderson Group listed anywhere. Right. Well, don't work too hard. Love you, she said, the words empty as air. Sure you do. After she hung up, I sat in my office chair and stared at the evidence spread across my monitors. Bank transfers, phone records, location data, text messages. My wife was having an affair, stealing our money and lying to my face every single day. The old me might have confronted her directly, demanded explanations, suggested counseling, but the old me hadn't been systematically betrayed and robbed by the person he trusted most. This called for a different approach. I opened a new file on my computer and titled it Operation Payback. Time to remind Morgan Driscoll exactly who she married. I spent the next 3 days planning like I was back in military intelligence, except this time the target was my own wife. Every detail mattered. Every move had to be calculated, precise, devastating. Morgan maintained her charade beautifully. She kissed me goodbye each morning, asked about my day over dinner, even suggested we plan a weekend getaway. The performance was Oscar-worthy, if you ignored the fact that she was texting Grant throughout every conversation. On Thursday evening, I made my first move. Honey, I called from the kitchen as Morgan gathered her things for another late meeting. I transferred some money today, just a heads up. She froze in the doorway. What kind of transfer? Moved our emergency fund into a new high-yield account. Better interest rate. You know how I am about maximizing returns. The color drained from her face. How much? All of it. $50,000. Don't worry, it's completely secure. Only I have access until the account matures. She forced a smile. That's great. Very responsible. What she didn't know was that I'd also frozen the private account where she'd been stashing our money. A few calls to old contacts, some paperwork citing suspicious activity, and her secret nest egg was temporarily unavailable. Have fun at your meeting, I said, kissing her cheek. She left 20 minutes later than usual, clearly rattled. My phone buzzed with a text from the same unknown number as before. She just arrived. Seems upset. A lot of shouting through the windows. I smiled and poured myself a drink. Friday morning brought the next phase. I'd spent years helping corporations protect themselves from cyber threats. I knew exactly how to gather information without breaking any laws, and more importantly, how to use that information effectively. I called Grant's office. Bishop Properties, this is Amanda. Hi, Amanda. This is Tom Driscoll from Midwest Security Solutions. I'm calling to verify some information for a background check we're conducting. Oh, okay. What do you need? Can you confirm Mr. Bishop's employment status and current projects? It's just routine verification for a client considering a major investment. 20 minutes later, I knew everything about Grant's business dealings. The man was drowning in debt, despite his flashy lifestyle. 3 properties in foreclosure, 2 business loans in default, and a divorce proceeding that was bleeding him dry. My wife was having an affair with a man who was essentially broke. The irony was delicious. I spent the afternoon crafting my masterpiece. Not a confrontation, not an argument, but something much more effective. I created a detailed financial report showing Grant's true situation, complete with public records and court documents. Then I compiled Morgan's lies into a timeline, cross-referenced with her actual whereabouts and our bank records. But I didn't send it to Morgan. That would be too easy. Instead, I sent copies to Tasha Williams and Rachel Chen, along with a note. Ladies, I thought you should know what kind of man your friend Morgan is getting involved with. As her husband, I'm concerned for her safety and financial well-being. Perhaps you could share some friendly advice? I also sent a copy to Jennifer Bishop, Grant's wife. Mrs. Bishop, I believe our spouses are having an affair. I thought you deserved to know. I'm happy to share any evidence that might help in your divorce proceedings. Then I sat back and waited for the suburban gossip machine to do what it does best. The explosion came Saturday morning. My phone started ringing at 8 a.m. Tom? It was Tasha, her voice shrill with excitement. Is this true? About Morgan and Grant? What about them? Don't play dumb. The financial records, the timeline, everything. Is Morgan really having an affair? I let the silence stretch. I prefer not to discuss my personal life, Tasha. But the evidence... Sometimes evidence speaks for itself. I just thought her friends should know what kind of situation she's gotten herself into. By noon, my phone had rung 12 times. Rachel, 3 of Morgan's coworkers, 2 neighbors, and even Morgan's sister from Portland. The story was spreading like wildfire, growing more dramatic with each retelling. Morgan came home at 2 p.m., her face flushed with anger. What did you do? She demanded. I looked up from my newspaper. Good afternoon to you too, dear. Don't play games with me, Tom. Tasha called. Rachel called. Half the neighborhood is talking about some report you sent around. Report? What report? She slammed her purse on the counter. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I folded my newspaper carefully. I'm afraid you'll have to be more specific. The financial information about Grant, the timeline, the bank records. Oh, that. I stood up, stretched. I was concerned about your new friend's financial stability. Did you know he's essentially bankrupt? 3 properties in foreclosure, massive debt, divorce proceedings. Not exactly the successful businessman he pretends to be. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. You had no right. To protect my wife from a con artist? To share publicly available information with people who care about you? I think I had every right. This is harassment. Is it? Or is it just good intelligence work? I walked to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator. You know what's interesting, Morgan? In all your outrage about my sharing information about Grant, you haven't once denied having an affair with him. She went very still. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone, opened the screenshots of her misdirected texts. Really? Because I have some messages that suggest otherwise. She grabbed for the phone, but I held it out of reach. Tuesday and Thursday meetings that don't exist. Restaurant charges on your credit card for places you've never taken me. $30,000 transferred to an account I've never seen. Should I go on? You're spying on me. I'm paying attention. There's a difference. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. What do you want? An apology would be nice. An explanation would be better. But honestly, Morgan, I'm not sure either of those would be enough at this point. She turned and walked toward the stairs. I need to think. Take your time, but while you're thinking, you should know that Jennifer Bishop has filed for divorce. Apparently, she's been looking for evidence of Grant's affairs for months. Your little romance was exactly what she needed. Morgan stopped halfway up the stairs. What? Grant's wife. She's divorcing him. With proof of adultery, she'll get everything. Which, admittedly, isn't much since he's broke, but still. I could see her mind racing, calculating. You're lying. Call her and ask. I'm sure she'd love to chat. Morgan disappeared upstairs. I heard her door slam, then muffled phone conversations that went on for hours. Around 6 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Grant's number. We need to talk. Tomorrow, noon, coffee shop on Main Street. I smiled and typed back. Looking forward to it. Sunday morning, I dressed carefully. Khakis, polo shirt, the picture of suburban respectability. I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early and chose a table near the window where everyone could see us. Grant arrived exactly on time, looking like he hadn't slept. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by the desperate energy of a cornered animal. You're destroying people's lives, he said without preamble. Am I? I thought I was just sharing information. He leaned across the table. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Enlighten me. Morgan and I... It's not what you think. I laughed. Really? What is it then? It's complicated. Most affairs are. He glanced around the coffee shop, lowered his voice. She came to me for investment advice. Things just developed. Into what? Love? Or just convenient afternoon entertainment? His jaw tightened. You don't deserve her. Maybe not, but you definitely don't. I pulled out my phone, showed him the financial report I'd compiled. Foreclosure notices, default judgments, bankruptcy filings. Very impressive portfolio, Grant. That's temporary. I have deals pending. You have nothing. Less than nothing. You're a fraud in an expensive suit, and now everyone knows it. He stood up abruptly. This isn't over. You're right, it's not. I watched him leave, then ordered another coffee. Phase 1 was complete. Morgan's affair was public knowledge, Grant's financial situation was exposed, and their little romance was crumbling under scrutiny. But I was just getting started. Monday morning brought the consequences of my weekend offensive. Morgan left the house without speaking to me, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. I gave her a cheerful wave from the kitchen window and settled in for what promised to be an entertaining day. The first call came at 9 a.m. It was my boss, Harold Brennan, owner of Midwest Security Solutions. Tom, I need to ask you about something delicate. What's on your mind, Harold? I got a call from Grant Bishop's lawyer this morning. Something about harassment and invasion of privacy. They're threatening legal action. I leaned back in my office chair. Is that so? Tom, please tell me you didn't do anything stupid. Define stupid. Harold sighed. Did you hack into his personal accounts? Access private information illegally? Harold, you know me better than that. Everything I shared came from public records. Court documents, property filings, business licenses. All perfectly legal. But you did share information about him? I shared publicly available information with people who asked for it. Is that illegal now? No, but it's aggressive. The man is having an affair with my wife, and she's been stealing our money. I think a little aggression is warranted. Silence on the other end. Then, Jesus, Tom, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Most people don't. I prefer to handle my personal business quietly. Do you need some time off? This has to be rough. Actually, I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months. But thanks for the offer. After Harold hung up, I turned my attention to Phase 2 of Operation Payback. If Grant wanted to escalate things legally, I was happy to oblige. I spent the morning documenting everything. Every lie Morgan had told, every dollar she'd transferred, every meeting that was actually a rendezvous. I cross-referenced her location data with Grant's, created a timeline that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. Then I did something that would have made my old intelligence handlers proud. I baited a trap. I called Morgan's office. Hi, this is Tom Driscoll. Is my wife available? I'm sorry, Mr. Driscoll, but Morgan called in sick today. Sick? That's strange. She left this morning like she was going to work. She called around 8:30, said she had food poisoning. I thanked the receptionist and hung up. Then I checked the location app on our shared phone plan. Morgan's phone was at Grant's downtown office. Perfect. I drove to Grant's building and parked across the street. Sure enough, Morgan's car was in the visitor lot. I took photos with timestamps, then settled in to wait. They emerged around noon, walking close together toward Grant's Jaguar. Morgan looked upset, gesturing emphatically while Grant tried to calm her down. I followed them to an expensive restaurant downtown, the kind of place where lunch for two costs more than most people spend on groceries in a week. I waited 15 minutes, then walked into the restaurant. Excuse me, I said to the hostess. I'm supposed to meet my wife for lunch, but I can't remember which table she reserved. Morgan Driscoll? She's with a tall gentleman, probably near the back. The hostess smiled. Of course, right this way. I followed her through the dining room until I spotted them at a corner table. Actually, I see them now. Thank you. Instead of approaching their table, I walked to the bar and ordered a drink. From my seat, I had a perfect view of their conversation. Morgan was clearly agitated, her voice rising despite Grant's attempts to shush her. I couldn't hear the words, but the body language was unmistakable. She was scared, angry, and looking for someone to blame. I pulled out my phone and started recording video. Not for any legal purpose. The restaurant was too noisy for audio, but because I wanted to document their behavior. After 20 minutes, I paid for my drink and left. I had what I needed. That evening, Morgan came home looking exhausted. How was work? I asked innocently. Fine. Feeling better? Your office said you called in sick. She froze in the act of hanging up her coat. Yes. Food poisoning. Felt better around lunchtime. That's good. Hate to think of you suffering alone." She looked at me suspiciously, but didn't respond. "Oh, by the way," I continued, "Jennifer Bishop called. She wanted to thank me for the information I provided. Apparently it's exactly what her divorce lawyer needed." Morgan's face went pale. "What information?" "About Grant's affair. With you, she was particularly interested in the restaurant receipts and hotel charges." "There were no hotel charges." The words were out before she could stop them. I raised an eyebrow. "I mean, I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." I opened my laptop. "But Jennifer does. She hired a private investigator months ago. Turns out you and Grant weren't as discreet as you thought." I showed her a printed email from Jennifer's lawyer. It was mostly legal boilerplate, but it mentioned photographic evidence and witness statements regarding Grant's extramarital activities. Morgan sank into a chair. "This is insane. You're destroying people's lives over nothing." "Nothing? You stole $30,000 from our joint account. You've been lying to me for months. You're having an affair with a married man. Which part of that is nothing?" "I never stole anything." I pulled up our bank records on the laptop screen. "Really? Because I have documentation of every transfer you made to that private account. The one you thought I didn't know about." She stared at the screen, her face cycling through emotions. Anger, fear, desperation, and finally, something that might have been defeat. "I was protecting us," she said quietly. "From what?" "From you. From this." She gestured around our kitchen. "From being trapped in a marriage that hasn't been real for years." "So you decided to steal our money and have an affair instead of talking to me." What was I supposed to say? That I'm miserable? That I feel invisible? That I've been planning to leave you for 2 years but didn't have the courage? The honesty was startling, even if it came too late. "You could have started with the truth." She laughed bitterly. "The truth? You want the truth? I stopped loving you 3 years ago, maybe longer. I stayed because it was easier than starting over. But then I met Grant, and for the first time in years, I felt alive again. And now? Now he's broke and getting divorced and his business is falling apart. So congratulations, Tom. You win." I closed the laptop. This isn't about winning. Isn't it? You've systematically destroyed everything that mattered to me. My relationship, my reputation, my financial security. What would you call it? Justice. She stood up, her composure cracking. "Justice? You're not some avenging angel, Tom. You're a bitter, controlling man who can't stand the thought of his wife being happy with someone else." "Maybe. But I'm also a man who keeps his promises. Remember those? The ones we made 20 years ago? People change. Some do. Others just reveal who they really were all along." Morgan walked toward the stairs, then stopped. "What happens now?" "That depends on you. What do you want?" I considered the question. What did I want? An apology? An explanation? For her to fight for our marriage? "I want you to understand what you've done. To me, to us, to yourself. I want you to face the consequences of your choices. And then? And then we'll see." She climbed the stairs without another word. I heard her door close, then the sound of muffled phone calls that went on past midnight. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in my office, surrounded by the evidence of my wife's betrayal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to press my advantage. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. The hunter, not the hunted. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected development. I woke to find Morgan already gone, but she'd left something behind, divorce papers on the kitchen counter. I read through them while drinking my coffee. Standard boilerplate, but with some interesting demands. She wanted half of everything, including my business, plus alimony for 10 years. She was also claiming emotional distress and requesting a restraining order to prevent me from harassing her and Grant. I had to admire the audacity. My phone rang. It was Phil. "Dude, you need to see the news." "What news?" "Channel 7. They're running a story about Grant Bishop. Something about fraudulent real estate deals and investor complaints." I turned on the television. Sure enough, there was Grant's photo next to a headline about alleged real estate fraud. The reporter was standing outside his office building, explaining how several investors had come forward claiming Bishop had misrepresented property values and used their money for personal expenses. "The investigation began," the reporter said, after an anonymous tip provided detailed financial records showing a pattern of suspicious transactions. I smiled. I hadn't provided that tip, but I had a pretty good idea who did. Jennifer Bishop was clearly not content to just divorce her cheating husband. She wanted to destroy him completely. "Tom?" Phil's voice brought me back to the phone. You still there? Yeah, just watching the news. Please tell me you didn't have anything to do with this. I shared some publicly available information with interested parties. What they did with it was their choice. Jesus, Tom, the man's life is over. He made his choices. Now he gets to live with them. After Phil hung up, I called my lawyer, David Chen, no relation to Rachel, despite the name. David was a divorce specialist with a reputation for aggressive tactics and creative solutions. Tom, I got the papers Morgan filed. Interesting reading. That's one word for it. She's asking for a lot, more than she's legally entitled to, especially given the circumstances. What circumstances? The affair, the financial irregularities, the false statements. I've seen the evidence you compiled. She doesn't have much leverage here. What do you recommend? Counterfile immediately. Adultery, financial fraud, abandonment. Ask for everything, the house, the accounts, even her car. Start high and negotiate down. Do it. Tom, there's something else. The restraining order request. It's based on some pretty serious allegations, harassment, stalking, threats of violence. All lies. I believe you, but we need to be careful. Don't contact her directly. Don't go anywhere she might be. Don't do anything that could be construed as intimidating. Understood. After David hung up, I spent the morning planning my next move. Morgan thought she could control the narrative by filing first, painting me as an abusive husband driven to stalking by jealousy. It was a smart strategy if she'd been dealing with a different kind of man, but she wasn't. I drove to Grant's office building around noon. His Jaguar wasn't in the parking lot, but I wasn't there to see him. I was there to see his assistant, Amanda, the helpful young woman I'd spoken to on the phone. Mr. Driscoll, she said when I approached her desk. From Midwest Security Solutions, right? Hear about the background check? Actually, I wanted to follow up on something. Has Mr. Bishop mentioned anything about legal troubles? My client is concerned about potential liability issues. Amanda glanced around nervously. I probably shouldn't say anything. Of course, I understand completely. Client confidentiality is important. It's just, there have been a lot of phone calls. Lawyers, investigators, angry investors. Mr. Bishop has been very stressed. I imagine so. These things can be difficult. He's been talking about leaving town, starting fresh somewhere else. I nodded sympathetically. Sometimes that's the best option. He asked me to research flights to Costa Rica yesterday, one-way tickets. Interesting. Grant was planning to run. Well, I appreciate your discretion, Amanda. You've been very helpful. I left the building with a new piece of information that changed everything. If Grant was planning to flee the country, he might try to take Morgan with him. That would complicate my plans considerably. I called David back. I need you to file an emergency motion. Grant Bishop is planning to leave the country, possibly with my wife. I want her passport flagged and their bank accounts frozen. On what grounds? Flight risk, potential money laundering, conspiracy to defraud. You're the lawyer. Find a reason. I'll see what I can do. That evening, Morgan came home with a different energy. She seemed almost excited, like someone who just received good news. We need to talk, she said. I looked up from my dinner. I thought we weren't supposed to communicate directly. Something about a restraining order? That's just legal strategy. This is important. I'm listening. She sat across from me, her expression more animated than I'd seen in months. I want to make a deal. What kind of deal? You drop the financial claims, I drop the restraining order. We split everything 50-50 and go our separate ways. Clean break, no drama. Why the sudden generosity? Because I'm tired of fighting. This whole thing has gotten out of hand. I studied her face. She was lying, but about what? What about Grant? What about him? Are you planning to continue your relationship? She hesitated. That's not your concern anymore. Actually, it is. Especially if you're planning to take marital assets with you when you leave. Her expression shifted slightly. I'm not taking anything that isn't legally mine. Define legally. Tom, do we have a deal or not? I pretended to consider it. I'll need to think about it. Talk to my lawyer. Fine, but don't take too long. I'd like to resolve this quickly. After she went upstairs, I called David. She's planning something, I told him. The sudden willingness to negotiate, the timeline pressure, something's changed. Maybe she just wants out. Maybe. Or maybe Grant convinced her they can salvage something if they move fast enough. What do you want to do? Keep the pressure on, file everything we discussed, and see if you can find out more about Grant's travel plans. I'll make some calls. Wednesday morning brought the answer. David called at 7 a.m. Grant Bishop was arrested last night trying to board a flight to Costa Rica. Turns out the FBI has been investigating him for wire fraud. They've been watching him for weeks. Was Morgan with him? No, but they found a second ticket in her name. Looks like she was supposed to meet him at the airport. I felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with something darker. Morgan had been planning to run away with Grant, probably taking whatever money she could access. If I hadn't acted when I did, I might have woken up to find both my wife and my savings gone. What happens now? Grant's looking at serious federal charges. Morgan could be charged as an accomplice if they can prove she knew about the fraud. Did she? That's the question, isn't it? Morgan came downstairs an hour later, her face pale and drawn. She'd clearly heard about Grant's arrest. "We need to talk," she said. "I thought we covered everything yesterday." "Grant's been arrested." "I heard. Something about fraud?" She stared at me suspiciously. "You knew this was going to happen." "I knew he was in financial trouble. I didn't know he was stealing from investors." "You destroyed him." "He destroyed himself. I just provided some information to interested parties." She sank into a chair. "They think I was involved." "Were you?" "No, I had no idea about any fraud. I thought he was just having cash flow problems." "But you were planning to leave the country with him?" Her eyes widened. "How did you know about the tickets? The same way I knew about the affair, the stolen money, and everything else. I pay attention." She put her head in her hands. "This is a nightmare. It's consequences. There's a difference. What do you want from me, Tom? What will it take to end this?" I looked at my wife of 20 years, sitting broken at my kitchen table, and felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. "The truth," I said. "All of it. No more lies, no more games. Just the truth." She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. "And then?" "And then we'll see what's left to salvage." Morgan's confession took 3 hours. She told me everything. How the affair started, why she'd been transferring money, what Grant had promised her about their future together. Some of it I'd already figured out, but hearing it directly was still like taking punches to the chest. "He said you were holding me back," she said, staring at her hands, "that I deserved better than a middle-class life in the suburbs." "And you believed him?" I wanted to believe him. I was so tired of feeling invisible, of being the cybersecurity consultant's wife instead of my own person. "So you decided to steal our money and run away with a con artist?" "I thought I was investing in our future. He showed me business plans, property developments, profit projections. It all seemed legitimate." I leaned back in my chair. "Did you know he was married when you started the affair?" "Yes. Did you care?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Not enough." "What about us? Did you care about destroying our marriage?" "I thought our marriage was already over. We barely talked, barely touched. We were like roommates pretending to be spouses." "Did you ever think about trying to fix it? Counseling, communication, anything?" "Would you have listened?" The question hung in the air between us. Would I have listened? Would I have been open to change, to admitting my own role in our problems? "I guess we'll never know," I said. She wiped her eyes. "So what happens now?" "Now you deal with the legal consequences of your choices. The divorce, the potential criminal charges, the financial mess you've created. And you? What do you get out of all this?" I considered the question. What did I get? My wife was gone. My marriage was over. My trust was shattered. I'd won the war, but the victory felt hollow. "I get to know who you really are," I said finally. "And who I really am." "Which is what?" "Someone who doesn't give up without a fight." The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, depositions, and paperwork. Grant was indicted on 12 counts of wire fraud and faced up to 20 years in prison. Morgan wasn't charged criminally, but the civil lawsuits from Grant's victims named her as a co-defendant. Our divorce proceeded quickly once Morgan dropped her demands for alimony and property division. She kept her car and her personal belongings. I kept everything else. The house, the accounts, the business, all of it stayed with me. "She's getting off easy," David said during our final meeting. "She could have lost much more." "She lost enough," I replied. "You're being generous. I'm being practical. Dragging this out won't benefit anyone." The truth was, I was tired. Tired of being angry, tired of plotting revenge, tired of living in the wreckage of my marriage. I wanted it over. Morgan moved out on a rainy Thursday morning. She didn't take much, a few suitcases, some photographs, her grandmother's jewelry. We didn't speak as she packed, but when she reached the front door, she turned back. "Tom? Yeah? I'm sorry for all of it." I nodded. I know. Do you think, if we'd done things differently, could we have made it work? I looked at her standing in my doorway, suitcase in hand, and tried to remember the woman I'd married 20 years ago. Young, ambitious, full of dreams about the life we'd build together. Maybe, I said, but we didn't. She nodded and walked out of my life. I stood in the empty house listening to the silence. No more lies, no more betrayal, no more games. Just quiet. My phone buzzed. A text from Phil. Beer tonight? You look like you could use one. I smiled and typed back. Make it 2. 3 months later, I was sitting in my office when Harold knocked on the door. Tom, you have a visitor. I looked up to see Jennifer Bishop standing in the doorway. Grant's ex-wife looked different than she had at our anniversary party, stronger, more confident. Mrs. Bishop, this is a surprise. I wanted to thank you, she said, sitting across from my desk. For what? For giving me the information I needed to protect myself. The evidence you provided helped me divorce Grant before his legal troubles became mine. I'm glad it worked out for you. I also wanted you to know that Grant pled guilty yesterday. 24 months in federal prison, full restitution to his victims. And Morgan? She's working as a waitress in Denver. They're trying to pay back what she owes from the civil suits. I nodded. It seemed appropriate somehow. Morgan starting over in a new city, learning to support herself without depending on men who made promises they couldn't keep. There's something else, Jennifer continued. Grant's assets are being liquidated to pay his victims. I thought you might want to know that your wife, ex-wife, is getting back about half of what she lost. That's good. She deserves a chance to rebuild. Jennifer studied my face. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone angrier, more vindictive. I was angry, very angry. But anger is exhausting if you hold on to it too long. She smiled. That's very wise. After she left, I sat in my office thinking about the past year. The betrayal, the investigation, the systematic dismantling of my wife's affair and my marriage. I'd won every battle, achieved every goal I'd set for myself. So why did I feel so empty? My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Tom, it's Morgan. I hadn't heard her voice in 3 months. Hi. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I got your office number from directory assistants. It's fine. How are you? I'm surviving, working, paying bills, trying to figure out who I am when I'm not someone's wife or girlfriend. That's good. I wanted you to know that I'm getting counseling, trying to understand why I made the choices I did. I'm glad. Tom? Yeah? Do you ever think about us? About what we had before everything went wrong? I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the parking lot where I'd once watched her meet Grant for their secret lunches. Sometimes. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? The question I'd been avoiding for months. Did I forgive her? Could I? I'm working on it, I said. That's more than I deserve. Maybe, maybe not. We talked for a few more minutes about practical things, insurance forms, tax documents, the final details of our dissolved life together. When she hung up, I realized something had changed. The anger that had driven me for so many months was gone, replaced by something quieter but more durable. Acceptance. I'd been betrayed, lied to, and stolen from. But I'd survived it. More than survived. I'd fought back and won. Not just the legal battles or the financial settlements, but something more important. I'd won back my self-respect. That evening, I drove through my neighborhood, past the houses where our friends lived, the places where Morgan and I had built our life together. Some of those friendships wouldn't survive our divorce. People would choose sides, make judgments, create their own versions of our story. But that was okay. I'd learned something valuable about the difference between revenge and justice, between winning and healing. Revenge was what I'd planned in those first angry weeks, the systematic destruction of everyone who had wronged me. Justice was what I'd actually achieved, consequences that fit the crimes, accountability for choices made. And healing? That was still a work in progress. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at my house. It was quiet, empty, but it was mine. Bought with honest work, kept through honest fighting, earned through honest pain. Tomorrow I'd wake up alone, make my own coffee, and continue building whatever came next. Tonight, that was enough. I walked inside, poured myself a drink, and opened my laptop. There were emails to answer, proposals to review, a business to run, the work of living one day at a time. The suburban war was over. I'd won. Now came the harder task of figuring out what victory actually meant.